grain, a nut, a seed, or a bean. They want conditions to be just right before they start to sprout and grow, which makes sense because it's survival. So that little immune system that's on that plant is called a plant nutrient, a phytonutrient. And in most hard-shelled plant foods in particular, it's called phytic acid. So phytic acid does a great job of protecting that seed, let's say, or that grain, like spelt. But in us, it can block mineral absorption, and it can slow down enzyme activity, which is your digestive function, which was the first class that we had. And the reason it was first is because it's the most important. If your digestion is going down, you can do anything you want and you're not going to lose weight. So we have to get that phytic acid off of that little hard-shelled plant. We basically are going to trick it into thinking that it's going to sprout and grow, and then once we trick it, we're going to eat it. It's kind of cruel in this really subtle way if you think about it, but that's what soaking does. So what we're doing is we are imitating the conditions of sprouting, a little bit acidic, warm, extended period of time, and that phytic acid releases into the soaking water. That's like sourdough bread. It's fermented, it's warm, a bacteria is introduced, like a sourdough starter or culture that's a little bit acidic, and it sort of mimics that sprouting phase, and that phytic acid is released. And all of the minerals, which there are a lot of minerals in grains, they're fantastic, really, really high B vitamins, a lot of zinc, a lot of magnesium, that are way more available to us if we get them soaked or sprouted or fermented, which is sourdough bread, the sprouted Ezekiel or Alvarado street bread, things like that. Flour Garden has a good sourdough bread. And we looked at some different sourdoughs when we were at SPD that day. The things to watch out for that were on that list is if those grains are enriched. So if you find a bread and you're like, it's sourdough, and it even says that some ingredients are organic, and this looks great, and you turn it over and it's like, enriched wheat flour is the first ingredient. Put it back. It's not going to work out well in the body. Okay? There's different pastas I've seen that are made traditionally. And Italians traditionally did soak and sprout their grain before they made pasta out of it. But finding fresh pasta, and you've seen that probably in the refrigerated section, it's always a really great find over just in the container. If you're just gonna get some pasta and you're like, this is crazy, I'm in a hurry, I just gotta get it. We saw that Bio Natura brand from Italy. They imported, it's a biodynamic company. They raise their grains really well, so I would go with that brand. It's good pasta. The other thing to think about when you're eating grains, again, this is a little scary for a weight loss class, but this is the best step for your health. If you eat that with some fat, it will help the blood sugar spike of that food. So usually a grain or like a white potato is the worst of the worst. They have a glycemic load that makes your blood sugar spike. And if you eat that in a balanced meal with some protein and some fat with that, that spike is going to be regulated and it's going to be much more in that nice curve that we want it to be, which does translate into over a longer period, you're not going to gain the weight from that insulin resistance. I was just talking, tell me your name. Sorry. Karen. I was just talking to Karen about different minerals in the body. Mineral absorption and efficiency will be totally lost if that glycemic load starts to get too high. And why is that? Insulin not only is a storing hormone for fats, it's also a hormone that carries a lot of minerals into cells. And so when the cells start to become even slightly insulin resistant, they're also becoming resistant to the minerals that are in the insulin. Osteopenia, osteoporosis. That is a big part of where that comes from. Same goes with nuts. You've seen like the little $7 packages of sprouted nuts that they have in health food stores, and you gasp in horror. I do. I'm like, oh my God. They are healthier for you. They're so expensive. You can do that at your house, and it's very, very easy. If you guys get on this kick, it's great to put nuts in a little salt water overnight, rinse them, let them dry on the counter or in your stove on low, and eat them that way. It is more optimal. It's obviously not as easy. as just getting them in and going. And some people are going to do that, and some people aren't. But just to have that information in your back pocket is really good.
So can you explain how you do that? Like, I mean, why the big thing with the raw almonds? So
They have to be raw.
Yeah, they have to be raw. So if I were to pick raw over roasted just to eat without doing this step, I would pick roasted. Like how we roasted those walnuts, we broke down some of the glycemic load of those walnuts just by dry roasting them. I dry roasted walnuts today to eat in a salad because I hadn't soaked. But if you want to soak, you get raw almonds or whatever nut you want to soak. Here's what I do. I rinse them out first, and then that water gets gross, and you're like, whoa, what was on those nuts? Pour the water out. Fill it up again with fresh water. Add a pinch of salt, and leave it on your counter overnight. Just 8 hours.
you just cover it? Just cover it?
But those nuts are gonna swell up huge. So like if you put them in a half gallon, only put halfway into that half gallon. Don't fill that half gallon up and leave them on your counter because you're gonna have a nut puzzle. You're gonna have to dig them out of that jar. So you leave them overnight, and then in the morning, if there's any water left, you drain it out. I usually rinse them again, but you don't have to. Put them on a cookie sheet, and here in the summer, you can just set them outside with a little screen over them. Like I have one of those little screen top things, and the sun does the job for the stove. But if you want to, you can put them in the stove just on low, and on the warm setting, and it pulls that water out, and those nuts, there's that bitter flavor that you get, especially with walnuts sometimes, where you're like, it's kind of like astringent in the mouth. It's gone because the phytic acid is gone, and that's what that is. So it tastes good too. And if you're into taste, which I totally helps.
Typically, how long are they on the stove for?
It depends on the nut. Almond, 6 hours.
Oh.
It's just on low. So you just like go to work or whatever, Sometimes I'll wait and do it that night.
Okay.
And then you wake up in the morning in your house, it's like Christmas. It smells really good.
So if you buy nut butter, you should buy roasted nut butter.
I do. I don't get raw nut butter. Also, what tastes better? The roasted tastes better to me. Roasted nuts taste way better to me. But yeah, I would pick a roasted nut over a raw nut if I were going to do that step. And there's many, many days that I don't, but I'm aware like, oh yeah, I have this little trick. Like if I decide to go on a cleanse, we can talk about that a little bit. I will go for a roasted nut over a raw nut, or I'll soak my nuts. And I start to make those decisions more based on the knowledge that I have. Same with seeds, you can do the same thing with seeds. Roasted pumpkin seeds, I can live off of them. They're great, so again, try and find roasted instead of raw. And then beans. It's good to soak beans. We kind of know that story. We don't need to talk much about what happens if you don't soak beans. But that consequence is from the phytonutrients that are in those beans messing up your digestion. They made a rhyme about it. We know it so well. And it helps to soak the beans. So all of that too is on my website. I made a page because I would write this out for people, and finally I was like, this is crazy. I need to just have a page on my website that people can go and see it. So it's all there in the recipes. Do you guys have any more questions about that? It sounds involved. It's actually very easy when you start to get into it. It's not a huge thing. So the other things that you guys might start doing more is like going out to eat. If you've been making your food more at home, and Steve actually emailed me and was like, what do we do about takeout? Like, this is crazy. So I put some things into the email, but let's talk about it just a little bit. When I go out to eat, I just find the most simple thing that I can, unless I really know the restaurant. Like there are some restaurants that have incredible good food, it's prepared well, they make their own bread, and they're more expensive, so we might not always go there all the time. But if I go out to Mexican food, beans and rice, some guacamole, some salsa, I try to avoid the chips or the things that I know are cooked in oil that's probably not the highest quality oil, because that type of like saucy, greasy food at a restaurant, the oil is probably rancid. So you would want to stay away from that. That is a huge cause of weight gain. And also just kind of like misshapen body. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like there's a difference between having some weight on you and having your body look over. Like this lump did not used to be there, but now it's there. So staying away from those rancid oils is great. It used to be that they would cook the chips in lard. And some places, they advertise no lard. And now, when we walk into a place, my husband's always like, oh, I bet you wish it was lard, right? Because lard is a staple fat to cook in. Crazy to think about. Where in the country is the fattest? Do you guys know? The South. What do they do? Everything. But what did they used to fry it in? They weren't fat before. Something happened. Crisco is what happened. Oh, The Help. Do you guys remember that movie?
Yeah.
Crisco is like the huge thing. My grandmother, she would have a panic attack if she didn't have lard or didn't have Crisco in her larder. Right? So that's what happened to the South. And I'm from Kentucky. I'm a product of it. I used to have Buddy bread, which is Wonder Bread. Y'all know that bread. With Crisco and white sugar.
Oh,
Yum. It was delicious. They made it delicious because they knew if they didn't make it delicious, nobody would eat it. But they artificially hydrogenated it, which if you know a little bit about chemistry, a saturated fat has a lot of hydrogens connected to the carbon, but a non-saturated fat, like what Crisco is made out of, vegetable oil, it doesn't have as many hydrogens on the carbon, and so they artificially press that hydrogen in, and it's called heart disease, the end result. That's what it is. So any oil like that, stay away from it, stay away from it. So if you go out and there's butter, yeah. Or like sometimes if I'm in a Mexican restaurant, I actually say like, I used to have asked the waiter, have you ever seen When Harry Met Sally? And they're like, oh yeah, and I'm like, I'm Sally. Okay, so that's gonna be your experience tonight, is I'm gonna ask for exactly what I want. And I'll even say like, hey, could you cook mine in butter? And up at like Katarina's, the Mexican restaurant, they're like, yeah, of course. They're totally fine with it. So if you know that, if you've been there a few times and they know you are like that, that's totally cool. Thai food, a lot of it is cooked in coconut, which is an excellent saturated fat to take heat. Probably not all of it, but I'm gonna go out to eat sometimes, and I imagine that most people are. So Thai food is a good choice. Also, when I go out, something that I really try to watch is the sauces. A lot of saucy, like at sushi sometimes we get like the really sweet sauces on the rolls and like that, or like the dipping teriyaki sauce. It's better just to get like fish and rice, a nice roll. There's some rolls I love, and I just say, "Have the sauce," and they know me, and they're like, they got it, And if you go out to eat at the same place enough, they'll get it. Does that make sense to you guys?
So refried, black, or pinto at Korea's?
Reaction-wise, less people react to pinto beans than they do black beans. So I would say pinto. For some reason, people react to black beans, and I don't know what it is. I don't know if we've just overeaten it for so many years, but people seem to do better in general with pinto beans. And we kind of do have a love affair with black beans. Yeah.
There's less surface area of pinto bean and black bean. There's more like
There's less surface area on a pinto bean?
yeah.
I don't know the
Yeah.
chemical differences between both of those. I just know in reactivity tests, people usually, if you look at a person's blood test, they'll test them allergy-wise for like everything, and sometimes people show up allergic to like pineapple. You would never know, but there it is. A lot more people show up allergic to black beans than pinto. So, yes. You guys know the main things to avoid: fried foods, right? That's kind of a big one. And I have a friend that has a fry daddy, and every once in a while we make fried chicken and cheese sticks that we make, and we fry them in ghee. And it's fine. I don't stuff myself, but every once in a while, if you're cooking in good fat, it's fine. And my parents that are still in Kentucky, now I've gotten them in the habit of using organic shortening, which is palm oil. So if you all are, who makes their own crust, and they're like, I have to have Crisco. Yeah, I get it. It makes a crust like this delicious, incredible thing.